Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Provider Data How CAQH is Responding to the Increased Demands of the Industry. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located to the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received during the question and answer portion. Again, NJMGMA would like to thank you for attending, and I'll now turn things over to Hassan.
Hi, Alex. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Hassan Sohail. I'm a product manager at CAQH. We're going to be talking about provider data, what CAQH is, some of the things we have done, and some of the new initiatives we are doing in order to meet our provider data challenges. So let's get started. We have a lot to cover today. This is a quick agenda for today. I'll give a brief overview of CAQH as an organization and the initiatives we're involved in. And then I'll talk about CAQH ProView and some of the resources credentialing specialists and practice managers can use. We frequently get asked about training, so I want to make sure everyone on the call is aware where they can go to get some training and resource material. Next in line, we're going to talk about CAQH ProView. My understanding is most folks on the call are going to be very familiar with ProView. We'll talk about a few enhancements we've made to the system, particularly in order to improve our user experience. We're really focusing on that this year. Next, we'll talk about some of the challenges in the provider directory space. This has picked up over the last couple of years. This is an area where the industry is really looking to solve some major challenges. And we'll share with you guys what the challenge is and what CAQH is doing. After that, we will give you guys a sneak preview about our delegated group module in CAQH ProView. If you're an organization that is a delegated entity with a health plan, this will be really useful. We'll talk about what we're doing, when we plan to release it, and some screenshots and some other details as well. Finally, we'll end with CAQH Core. That's our certification body. We'll talk to you guys about what they do, how they work, and some of the things that they're working on as well. All right, let's jump right in. So CAQH is a nonprofit alliance. It's the leader in creating shared initiatives to streamline the business of healthcare. The logos on the screen you see are the organizations that sit on our board, and really their topmost executives help us identify the areas that are causing challenges and adding costs, administrative costs in the healthcare space. So we work very closely with these organizations. They help us identify problem areas. And as I mentioned, we're a nonprofit alliance. So we're really a mission-driven organization. Our mission is to bring these multiple parties to the table and make sure that we're focusing on areas that can help make healthcare better. Over here, you'll see the slide shows the areas that CAQH as an organization is involved in. We'll start on the top left. I talked a little bit about CAQH Core. CAQH Core helps write national operating rules for electronic business transactions. Again, this is in line with our mission to reduce dependency on paper, have the industry begin adopting electronic transactions to reduce costs, and some other initiatives I'll share with you at the later part of the presentation that Core is working on in their space. Next on the top right is CAQH Solutions. These are the shared utilities that collect and manage provider and member data. Most folks on the line will be familiar with CAQH ProView. It falls under the Solutions umbrella. And here, the Solutions team, we work with health plans and other organizations that are involved in the business of healthcare, and we try to help them provide solutions where they can reduce their costs. And again, if you have used ProView before, it's a reduction of cost not only for the health plan, but also for provider users, where it's a one-stop shop for them. So solutions are sort of our shared utility in the industry. Last but not least, I want to talk about CAQH Explorations. CAQH Explorations is our research arm. and they uncover how much progress the industry is making with regard to adopting electronic transactions. If you want to learn more about CAQH explorations, we publish an annual report called the CAQH Index. You can find that on our website. And a neat little tidbit, there's still about $11 billion worth of savings in the industry if we continue to adopt electronic transactions. So the report is filled with insights like that. If you're interested, please check it out. All right, I'll talk a little bit about some of the solutions that CAQH has created to help the industry reduce the administrative costs over the years. So first was our UPD solution, Universal Provider Database. This is sort of the older name for what is now CAQH ProView. It's really focused on the credentialing use case and ensuring that there's one place where we can collect provider data and provide it to the health plans and reduce our dependency on paper applications. In 2004, we launched Sanctions Track. This again is it's a solution that helps health plans monitor any disciplinary actions from providers in order to make sure that the health plan can onboard the provider and enroll them appropriately, and the provider doesn't have any issues on their record. This again helps in the credentialing process, so it really pairs up nicely with CAQH ProView or UPD. There is Enroll Hub. Enroll Hub is our electronic payment and remittance solution for providers. If you don't want to get paid by physical checks, you can sign up for electronic payment. Next, I want to talk about the CAQH ProView platform. You can see it encompasses several solutions, Enroll Hub being one of them, and we've decided to call it a platform because really it's a big part of the credentialing workflow. So there are really several solutions that fall into this umbrella. We talked about UPD. CAQH ProView is now the new name of that. In 2016, we launched our directory solution. What we do in our directory solution is we ask some more directory-specific questions as part of the CAQH ProView workflow. In 2017, we launched CAQH as a CVO. It's called Verified, where we collect data from the ProView system and verify some provider credentialing information in order to meet NCQ and other standards. And lastly, our newest bucket is groups. Well, we're going to talk about that in today's presentation. We're starting with our focus on delegated groups, and we're going to move to other non-delegated groups and other entities where we can better collect information from them. All right. So let's talk a little bit about CAQH ProView. We have a very large community of providers, 1.4 million unique providers and growing. As you guys may already know, providers attest once every 120 days. At the moment, we have 1 million current active patients. So what this means is at any point in time, 1 million providers have attested to their information within the last 4 months. We have over 900 participating organizations who are using the data that providers submit at CAQH ProView. Most of these organizations are health plans, but we also have some hospital systems and some other organizations that utilize data from CAQH ProView as well. And lastly, in an effort to streamline credentialing across the healthcare space, CAQH has a CRED app. There are 12 states that have embraced the CRED app. Some other states have their own apps, but we are continuing to gain traction with some of those states. Over time, we want to make sure that there's one application in the industry. It's the same application, same data that everyone's using to fill out in the credentialing process. All right. Let's talk a little bit about some resources that you can use if you are a ProView user and a credentialing specialist. So we have several ways to communicate with ProView users and credentialing specialists and providers. Some of them are listed on the screen. We obviously do email notifications, explaining any changes. Last year, we created this new feature called Broadcast Message. If you log into your profile, this pop-up will display and let you know if any upcoming information or any new changes that you need to be aware of. We've also started to do webinars like this and others where we talk about various parts of the application and provide training. And the training is also provided in recorded demos. Finally, there's a lot of reference material, FAQs, user guides, which you can access. The links are on the slide, and you can really explore to see, sign up for any webinar or training that you might need. So if you're looking for a refresher, this is the place to go. All right. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the changes we've made over the past year in CAQH ProView. We, for your knowledge, we do a release about once a month, and I'm not going to cover everything that we've done. I'm just going to highlight the areas, especially the provider portal-facing change that we've made in the past year. So the first change we've made, we heard a lot from our users, and they said, you know, the attestation workflow takes too many clicks. You know, I just want to attest to my profile. So if you might have already seen this change. Now, if your profile doesn't have any errors, this box will pop up and you can attest with one click. Previously, there used to be several screens where you have to review your information and make sure it was accurate. We've done away with that. We want to make sure it's easy for users to, once they've entered all their information, to go and attest to their profile. Next is the authorization workflow. Again, we got feedback that oftentimes providers and practice managers weren't really sure what organizations were accessing their data. Although the information was in their profile, it was hard to get to. They didn't really know where it was, and they didn't really understand the implications of it. So we've redesigned our authorization screen. There's actually a new tab. If you log into your ProView account, it's called Authorization. You click on it, and it'll explain to you what this page means, and it'll show you all the organizations that have subscribed to your data, and you can choose to authorize them or not. And it'll let you know the implications of choosing your any selection that you've made. Finally, this is another much desired enhancement. Users often had trouble getting their password or email reset. Oftentimes what would happen is they'd be managing a profile for a provider, and a new provider joined, and they had a pre-existing account, and they had no way of getting that information. So now we have a self-service forgot password and reset email options. If you're ever in a situation where you can't get into a CAQH account, there's a self-service workflow where you can enter your username. We'll send the new password to your email. If you don't know the primary email, we have a secure workflow in order to reset that as well. Lastly, I want to talk about improved keyboard navigation. We've been hearing a lot from practice managers, really super users who are in the ProView system a lot, and they've said, you know, I like to use my keyboard to navigate through all the fields in ProView. However, when I get to a drop-down, the tab function doesn't work, and I have to use my mouse to click over. So for a while, we researched this problem. It was something that many of our users wanted, and more recently, a couple of months ago, we made an enhancement where now you can use your tab function and other keyboard functions to fully navigate through the whole CAQH profile. So we're hoping this will resonate a lot with some of our super users. So as I was talking about all these user-facing enhancements we've made, CAQH is really beginning to track user satisfaction with Net Promoter Score. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Net Promoter Score, it's a metric that's used by many industries to gauge how satisfied end users are with the product. And really, the Net Promoter Score asks a simple question: would you recommend CAQH ProView to a friend or a colleague? Answer from 1 to 10. And based on that score, a metric is calculated. And it gives us insight into how satisfied our users are with our product. Is our product meeting user needs? And if our score is lower than the benchmark, we sort of add these additional enhancements to our backlog, and we make additional changes to make sure that our system is doing what it's supposed to do. If you want to learn more about Net Promoter Score and how it works, there's some links at the bottom. But we launched a survey, and some of you may have been asked this survey. We realized that we have a pretty good score. As you can see, the industry average for software and other applications is about 28. ProView receives a score of 48, which is very good. It's not in the excellent range, and we're continually striving to make sure that we're making more enhancements to make our system easy to use for our users, so we can really truly be a world-class solution. When folks answered the survey, they said CAQH was a one-stop shop. It reduced redundancies in paperwork, and so there was an all-in-one workflow. And those are really the things that speak to our mission and let us know that the solution is doing what it was supposed to do. All right. Let's talk about some of the industry forces that are driving stakeholders to solve for inactive provider directories. Again, if you are an office manager, credentialing manager, over the last year or so, we've noticed that there's been an increased demand from health plans to know provider directory demographic information. I'll talk a little bit about the background of that and why that is and what we're doing in order to address it. So according to CMS, 45% of provider directories have inaccuracies, which can cause significant access to care. So this is a big deal. Patients who are looking for doctors can't find them because the address is wrong or the phone number is wrong or something in the listed directories is inaccurate. So CMS is really creating the driving force behind this need for health plans to confirm this information. I'll talk a little bit about what they found. So what CMS found was that they did an audit of several thousand providers, and they found out that, as I mentioned, half of them have some form of error, about 45%. And on the left-hand side of this graph, you'll see what those errors break down to. The majority of the errors are that the provider is not practicing at the listed location, 66%. That's a significant percentage. The rest of the errors are sprinkled, and again, the top ones are inaccurate phone number, the provider is not accepting new patients, or the suite number is wrong. So as you can see, if you're a patient and you're looking to make an appointment, you're looking to find a doctor, maybe you're new to the area, you switch carriers, these are things that are very important. And if they're wrong, it really inhibits your ability to get proper care. So CMS has put a lot of pressure on the health plans in order to get this information right. So if you're getting phone calls, it's really, this is the driving force behind it. But we at CAQH recognize that phone calls really aren't the real answer. We need a better industry solution in order to make sure that health plans have the best directory information. Providers and credentialing managers can provide that information easily, and ultimately the patients have the best information and they don't have any barriers to care. So as I mentioned before, most of these errors have to do with the provider not practicing at location. And we'll talk about how we're really targeting that big error category. So the current state of the industry is, right now, I'm sure most of you are getting a lot of phone calls for correct demographic and directory information from various stakeholders. Multiple plans are outreaching to the same provider office. I actually spoke with the provider group, and they said that they get so many calls that they stopped answering the questions the health plans ask about directory and demographic data, and they only respond to questions in writing. So the state of the market is quite bad. And really what we want to do is we want to provide an alternative. What we want to provide is a situation where the information is on the left-hand side, you'll see in the feature state. Health plans are asking CAQH through ProView that information, and then we can ask the provider in their credentialing workflow, in the ProView workflow, that information and can go back to the health plan so that all the information is in one place. Again, like we did with the credentialing use case, Instead of multiple health plans asking for the stuff individually, they can go to one platform, get everything they need. That's the vision. What we've done here is we created enhancements, and some of you may have already been exposed to this. I know we have some health plans in New Jersey that are looking to roll this out. So if you haven't seen this, don't worry. It might come out as each health plan starts adopting this feature. But we allow health plans to send their current directory information to our systems, and then we internally do a compare to make sure that we have captured the information in ProView that the health plans have in their directory systems. And then anytime the health plan has a record, a location record that we don't have in the ProView system, we ask you when you log into ProView, and we ask you to tell us more about that location. So if your provider is part of this scenario, you might see this little pop up when you log into ProView, and all it's asking you to do is take a look at these practice locations that health plans have on file for you, and if you think they're accurate, you can respond accordingly, and if they're not, you can reject them. So here in this example, 170 Finley Road, the health plan has 2 locations on record for your provider, and they're not in your ProView profile. So you can either accept them, and when you accept them, they'll be added to your ProView profile, and you can include all the necessary information. If you reject them, you're basically telling the health plan that the information is wrong for some reason. There's a reason drop down you can select. That location will likely be suppressed or removed from the health plan directories. And that's the strategy that we're using to clean up directory information. You'll see on the screen there's also an I don't know option. We understand there's situations where the person managing the ProView profile might not know this information or might need some additional time in order to validate that the location record is correct. And we don't want this workflow to slow down your attestation process. So if you don't know, you can click the I don't know option. What the I don't know option will do is the next time you log into a test, it will show you that individual record that you said I don't know to. It will show you that one more time to see if you have a better understanding of that record. And really, we're going to keep showing you that record until we get an accept or reject response. But the goal is that this is the information that the health plan needs to validate. We don't want them to call your offices. We want all of them to, post the information here so that in your existing workflow you can answer these questions. If you want to know more about provider directories, how CAQH recommends you include directory information and answer some of the questions in profiles, we've created a provider checklist. It's on, and we actually have a website where you can go to CAQHproviderdirectory.org, where you can get access to this information. If you have questions on what locations should I submit, I don't want to reject locations because I'm afraid it'll affect the payment of my claims. The answers to your questions are going to be on the website. And as I said, there's a checklist here. As a refresher, we recommend that if your provider is accepting appointments at a practice location, you want to add those locations. And if they're not accepting appointments, or if they're coming in, or if you find yourself having to add a bunch of locations to the CAQH profile, you really take a step back and think, why am I adding these locations? Because what the health plans want to know is, what are the locations providers practicing so they can publish them in a directory? If the provider is not practicing there, they don't want to publish them in a directory. We often get questions around claims, and providers say, I've included all my locations that my provider will ever practice there because I want to make sure my claims are paid. Well, every health plan we talk to, they say that they don't consider this information in the payment of claims. If you ever come across a situation where a health plan says, I want your location information there, or your claims will get paid, please do bring that to our attention. We don't want this to be the source where health plans decide whether claims are not going to get paid. All right, moving on. What CAQH is doing in 2018 is we are really expanding into a provider data space that we are Purview workflow wasn't really designed to address, and it's this workflow of large groups or any group in general. We've noticed that practice managers are managing profiles on behalf of providers, and the current profile is set up for an individual provider. So we wanted to make a group module, and we're starting with a delegated group. And I'll talk a little bit about what delegated means. So at the bottom, if you don't know what delegated groups are, delegated groups are entities that are responsible for credentialing providers by themselves instead of the health plan doing the credentialing. We want to focus on this market because we feel from an industry standpoint, there is the most room for improvement. However, as we launch this feature later this year, we're expected to launch at the end of Q3. We'll expand into other scenarios where non-delegated groups can really utilize Purview and manage information on behalf of a large volume of providers. We think that it's going to include increased confidence in provider data for both our providers and our health plans, and also help us address some data quality issues that the industry at large has, and make it easier for providers to enter that information if they have a large group of providers. And then as we build this process out, we'll add facilities and other provider types to our solution as well that are not common or that the current workflow isn't designed to accommodate today. Let's talk a little bit about the delegated group workflow and why we think, why we want to focus here and why it's really highly manual and error-prone. So if you're a delegated group, what this means is you don't put your information in Purview, you send your information directly to a health plan because you're doing all the credentialing. If you zoom out for a second, what this means is each group has to manage an Excel file of a lot of data of providers on their roster and send them to each individual health plan. And different health plans have different data requirements. So you see this diagram shows how burdensome it is, both for groups on the left-hand side, but also for the health plans to get all this data in disparate formats from different sources, and it's not standardized. And what they found is it's generally the lowest quality data they get. So whether they use it for basic provider data process or the directory process, the health plans find that because of this highly manual process that they're getting this information from, the information tends to have a lot of errors. So what we want to do with the delegated group module is reduce these administrative burdens and address some of the market problems that are at play. So on the left-hand side, you'll see some of the market problems for the delegated groups. As I mentioned, the groups are maintaining complex files for each different health plan. And again, these files have a lot of information, so it's not one or two columns, it's many columns, and it can get very confusing very quickly, especially if you're dealing with multiple health plans. The groups are required to send updates to these files at different times. So different health plans have different requirements. So it's not like every Monday of the first month the group has to send these files. They're all varied. All this information is done through a manual review, highly error-prone, and as I mentioned, the data quality is bad. So on the left-hand side, let's take a look at what our module hopes to accomplish. So we want to create a standard input file format. And again, standards are good for everybody. Just make sure that the information is aligned, everyone's on the same page, and you can build processes around it. CAQH will allow groups to maintain all of that data in one place and allow health plans to access it on demand. So they don't have to send an email, they don't have to reach out to their group's contact, they'll have access to it on demand. CAQH will support standard output file formats for health plans for them to automatically process it into the internal system. So this is really useful because once you create standards, the health plan can create integrations and electronic feeds to the source system, so they're also not doing any manual processing of this information. And then finally, CAQH will simplify maintenance and processing of this information and utilize scoring algorithms and other data quality techniques to improve the quality of the data. And I'll talk about that in a second. So one of the things that we've done is we've created a standard delegated group roster. And again, standards help us identify errors up front and help us streamline workflows. So our team did was we looked at a wide variety of roster files across various groups. We understood what most of these groups are sending, what most of the health plans want, and we put it all together to create a standard document that will meet everyone's needs. It's pretty straightforward. It has 3 distinct tabs: provider demographic information, location information, and then provider location combination. And again, this is, you can send this across all of your health plans in one file. What we found out that just having this file in this sort of logical fashion helps identify a lot of errors. And we actually, as part of the system, we do some basic error validation to make sure that all fields are required. All the required fields are entered. They're entered in the correct format. The fields contain acceptable values according to some reference tables, and that the data is logical. So what we mean by that is all locations listed with the provider fraction there must be listed in the demographic location stat, or if a provider was in the previous roster, that they're also in the updated roster, and if they're not in the updated roster and they haven't been flagged for termination, we'll flag it as an error for the group sending the information. So all of these data validation techniques help us ensure that the quality of data that gets to the health plan is good, and then downstream, when any of that information is used, is of high quality, and again, everyone in the industry can benefit, down to the patient who needs that information. So here's a quick example. We actually took our standard roster file, we shared it with some groups in the DC area. That's where our headquarters are located. And they actually, they found some great improvements. So they said 15 duplicate locations were removed. They found all of these invalid taxonomy codes. They had 777 degrees in provider specialties converted to industry standards. So they're using values that were not standard, which our standard roster helped them with. And over 900 provider and location relationships were updated. And this is really cleaning up the directory information in the industry. Some of the comments we received were that this is really straightforward, it's logical. Someone said I was able to make just a few changes in their echo system and then auto-populate it in the new format. So again, the goal is we want this to be easy for groups to adopt, and we want health plans to utilize this because we think the information is going to be much better than it was before. Here's some screenshots. If you are a group, a delegated group, you can upload a roster on the left-hand side, but then you can also download that roster at any time. If you want to upload, the next roster, you can download the existing roster and make the necessary updates. You can receive an error report. And you can also we can automatically calculate a change report for each different health plan. This is something that these groups have to do manually today, but our system can do it because all the information is there. Here's another screen where you can give authorization to all the health plans that are requesting information. Again, if you're a delegated group and a health plan requests your information, you can see it all here. You can manage who gets it, and you can also see when they use it. So you'll see in the middle card, Greater Rochester Independent Practice Association. That's the organization, and we can see that they requested the information on the particular date. So you'll have visibility into when these health plans are utilizing the information and when they're reviewing it. You can also search and pre-authorize health plans, and if they haven't logged into the system yet, if the health plan isn't using it, you can pre-authorize them so that when they do, they can directly get your information on time. So again, this is something that we're building out today, but we really feel that it's going to be a great benefit to everyone involved in the delegated community. All right. We still have a little bit of time left. I want to talk about CAQH core. We talked about core a little bit in the beginning. Really, the mission of our core part of our organization is to drive the creation and adoption of healthcare operating rules that support standards and accelerate interoperability. And again, align on administrative and clinical activities amongst providers, payers, and consumers. Unlike the rest of the organization, CORE has its own board, and the board is made up of various stakeholders. So you have your provider organizations there, you have vendors, you have health plans. Really, all of these parties collaborate, and they establish a vision that the industry needs to adopt in order to adopt operating rules around electronic transactions. So what we do is, as CAQH, we act as an industry-wide facilitator. We bring all these people together and all these various stakeholders together and say, you know, what is the best for the industry, what is the best for everyone, and we make sure that there's deep consensus amongst all parties before we offer any operating rules. So we've also been nominated by the Health and Human Services Secretary as a national author of 3 sets of operating rules, and some of those are mandated in the Affordable Care Act. So this really gives us credibility when we go out and want to recommend additional rules where the industry can benefit by adopting them. Again, here is a slide that talks a little bit about some of our core organizations. We have 130 organizations. As I said, they're made up of health plans, provider organizations, and vendors that are involved in the electronic transaction space. We have 4 different phases of operating rules. 3 of them are federally mandated, and CORE does certify organizations on this. There's one rule that is not mandated, but we highly recommend. We believe it is really beneficial to the industry. And as we said before, there's a lot of room to improve in adopting these standards. So as an industry, we can collectively save billions of dollars if we were to adopt some of these rules and some of the other ones that are currently being proposed. Let's talk a little bit about the operating rules here. So health organizations that are implementing them are seeing direct benefits, and we've listed some of those in this slide. So rules around health plan eligibility transactions and claim transactions, they really improve the patient registration process and reduce claims denials, because what you're doing is you're checking to make sure the patient is eligible and they're authorized before you provide healthcare services to them. It really decreases claims duplication and reduces misidentification of patients and mistaken denial. So again, all of these rules are set in place so that all the administrative burdens that you as providers or provider organizations deal with and the health plans, the costs that they deal with are reduced. So that's the phases 1 and 2. Phase 3 are around electronic fund transactions and electronic remittance advice. This is really about improving cash flow, making sure that expedited payments are made. And again, it eliminates the need for manual rekeying for reconciliation, and it increases the ability to conduct targeted payment issue follow-ups. So these are rules that make sure that payments are paid accordingly, and so everyone is following the rules and doing what they're supposed to do. Reducing rework, again, both on the provider side and on the health plan side. CORE, as I mentioned, has some rules which are not mandated. The first 3 rules are mandated. The 4th rule is not, but we think that these are rules that are really beneficial to the industry. So these are around health claims, referrals, enrollment, and premium payments. And again, this is improving the revenue cycle space and improving the efficiencies in the revenue cycle space when dealing with claim submissions. reducing staff time on manual phone and fax inquiries around prior authorization. That's a big issue that we come across. Prior authorization is a big challenge for a lot of organizations. We want to make sure that that's dealt with upfront appropriately, so that there are no issues downstream and you don't have to make frequent phone calls and faxes. And then finally, this reduces delays in processing change of life events. So when those events happen, sometimes it can be tricky when they'll take into effect, when the appropriate parties will be notified, and this really helps to make sure that those delays are reduced. And as I mentioned before, I think it's really important to note that CAQH is an HHS designated operating rule authority. So we cover these HIPAA rules and that cover administrative transactions, and we're constantly looking to see what additional rules can we adopt. The rule adoption process is not straightforward. It is straightforward. It's a time-consuming process because we have to make sure the industry is represented and that they're all bought in. And then after that, we work to make these rules so that they're benefits for everybody. And as I mentioned, some of these get adopted into legislation to improve the industry overall. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about what CAQH Core is doing. They recently released a report that talks about operational challenges that may slow or add to costs around the implementation of value-based payments. So what they've done is value-based payments are a new payment structure that's come up in the industry. Core has created an advisory group with some of the same stakeholders that we use to help us write the rules and get industry consensus. And this advisory group is coming up with a list of best practices that can also align with CAQH Core's mission, again, to reduce the administrative burden in the healthcare space. So there are 12+ candidate organizations, again, from the leaders in the industry that help us identify some of the recommendations in the new value-based care space and these new payment models. And if you're interested, there's a link to the report, and it details sort of 5 areas of opportunity that organizations can adopt that would improve their value-based payment processes and methods. All right, we seem to have about 15 minutes left. This concludes the presentation. Again, my name is Hassan Sohail. Please feel free to ask any questions. Please do visit our website, talk to us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We really love to hear from our users, anyone who interacts with our solutions, our reports. And if you have any questions for me, please do let me know.
Okay, so we do have a few questions. The first one, the hospital that I worked for moved 5 years ago, but CAQH has the old address in their database / dropdown. How do I go about getting the address corrected in your database or dropdown?
Great question. So we do have a process. If we have an older address in our database, you can reach out to our help desk. But more recently, we're moving forward with an initiative to align our list of addresses and hospital names with an industry standard. We hope to be moving forward with that in the next month or two. So soon, hopefully soon, you'll see an updated list that has from reputable industry sources, the address for these hospitals and their appropriate names. If you want to make sure your specific hospital needs to be added, you can reach out to our help desk, and they can point you to the appropriate workflow there.
Okay, next question. When I manually enter a date into a required field, it often deletes automatically and does not save. And to fix that, I have to use the calendar and click till I get to a date years ahead sometimes. Why can't I manually enter dates?
So this is a bug that it's in our purview system. We came across it recently. Our team is working to resolve it. Currently, you have to pick a date from the calendar picker, and the date will save. Our teams are working on identifying how to allow users to manually enter a date and it to save as well. But I believe we are currently working on it. We have our developers and our tech leads focused on this issue. So hopefully you'll see the fix soon. If this is a blocker for you, I think you can pick the date from the calendar picker, and the information will be saved as a short-term workaround.
Okay. How do I take my individual CAQH files and move them to a delegated group module? I have 12 providers. So
currently, the delegated group module is going to be available for delegated groups. Now, it depends. If you are a group, you have to ask, are you delegated? Do you have a delegated relationship with any pairs? Most of the time, delegated groups tend to be large groups. If you have only 12 providers, chances are you're probably not a delegated group. However, actually starting now this year and moving into next year, we're coming up with a similar functionality that you saw with delegated groups for non-delegated groups. And again, this would be for folks like you who have several providers and manage the information for several providers in one place, but you're not a delegated entity and you don't do credentialing yourselves. The health plan does credentialing for you. We're going to be moving forward with that this year and next year. We're going to be doing research. We're actually looking to talk to users. If you have feedback to share, please do reach out on what this new portal will look like and what it will do. So as I shared in my presentation earlier, maybe I can go a few slides back. We are working on this expanded group capability that will touch all different group types. We don't have a launch date yet, but we hope to launch something by next year, which will have some part of this functionality.
How do we find out if we are a delegated group?
So generally, if you're a delegated group, you can reach out to your insurer and ask them if your organization has been deemed as a delegated group for that insurer. Delegation is between the group and the insurer. So what happens a lot of the times is an organization, a provider organization, is delegated for one insurer, but it's not delegated for another insurer. So you have to know which pairs you're delegated for. And as I said, generally, this is something that happens during the contracting phase. When you're contracting with an insurer, they identify whether you can be a delegated or entity or not. And generally, it is for those larger organizations at play. You can certainly ask to be delegated, and there are instances where insurers will identify if you're a good organization to become a delegated organization or not.
And that's all the questions that we have. If anybody has any other questions, please type them in the question box. We'll just give everybody a minute. Okay, if there are no more questions, we will be sending out Hassan's contact information, so you can contact him if you have any questions on today's presentation. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending.